wanted to open his own restaurant. And he's from Wisconsin. And, we're learning all this stuff while talking to him. And he's a big like snout to tell. He wants to use everything when he's cooking and making meals. And he's really big into curing and charcuterie and, any of the cured type of food is always on the menu or mixed in somehow. So, interviewing all of this, we're getting to know him really well. And we find out he's a cancer survivor as well. And so kind of in the car ride back, Jet and I are talking and Jet's like, we should name his restaurant Cured, because it's got this double meaning.
Wow.
This like the fact that he's, cured from cancer, but also like he cures charcuterie and pickled items and like it just kind of like at that moment I was like, that's a great idea, so we got back jamming and created what I think is a really beautiful brand for his story.
Welcome to People Who Design. I'm Cam Kress, and each week I talk with designers and builders about their personal journey and the practice of design. This week I'm talking with my good friend and designer Kevin Taylor. Kevin's a design director and brand strategist with nearly 3 decades of experience with iconic brands in the US. Kevin's worked on everything from Southwest Airlines rebrand to IBM to Publix, Home Depot, and Baskin-Robbins. His work is a blend of craft and deep emotional storytelling. I love this conversation because we really talk about the soul of a brand, designing for emotional response, and how to create a really good visual identity. And also why craftsmanship and taste will matter more than ever in the age of AI. So let's get into it. Kevin, how's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being guest number 2. This is the second episode so far of the People Who Design podcast. So thanks for being early adopter.
Always.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we go way back.
I know. Back in our Orlando days.
Yeah, man. Now we're both over on the other side of Florida, so I like it better over here.
I do too, man.
No shade on Orlando. Orlando is great. You're one of the designers that I've looked up to over the years, and I thought this was a perfect opportunity to learn more about your background story and just kick off with ask you questions that I would normally not ask you, So I thought this was a great time to kind of dig into your story and learn more about how you got into design and, where you've been in your career that brought you here and your thoughts on the future. So maybe we just start there, like what's your entrance into the design world, into your career?
Yeah. I'm going to age myself and go back quite a ways. I've been doing this like I just looked it up, like 27 years. So I've seen a lot of things change. But I guess my entrance really is just an art kid, like growing up, design, like always drawing, sketching, whether it was like Transformers or robots or, anything like that. And then getting into skating and skateboard design and comic books. I was a huge comic book nerd, still love them to today. And so a lot of that just kind of bled over. I'd be looking at these cool skateboard decks and I'd be drawing like Bones Brigade logos and any logo that I saw, I'd redraw it just to figure it out. And, it kind of like spin me off into wanting to do my own things. So definitely that I was really kind of like digging, Sex Pistols, any of the album covers that were coming out and there were all the great Dead Milkman, Pennywise, like all the great punk rock scene. There was a lot of stuff there. So I think I grew up in that time around MTV where it was just all really cool artwork and
visuals everywhere.
Yeah. Visuals everywhere. They just blasted me. So it was like a matter of absorbing that and then going from there to Savannah College of Art and Design. And originally going for sequential art to do comics. And so the top floor of was sequential art and the downstairs was graphic design. And I just stumbled into the hallway one day and was kind of like, oh, this is a lot of what I was used to as a kid seeing and, getting interested in it. So I took a couple classes in design and then just kind of fell in love with it and was always like, I see a lot of design from the comic world as well. So maybe at some point they might merge, who knows? But definitely got more interested in it. And it's also kind of early Photoshop, early Illustrator, all that kind of stuff. So I was starting to learn how to do it all on the computer, and just kind of took off from there. And 27 years later, here I am.
That's
Getting
awesome.
to chat with you. So
yeah, man,
it's been fun.
That's awesome. So what was the first thing that you designed, if you can remember? You mentioned comic books. Was that kind of the early classroom start of sketching out?
Yeah, no. The first thing I designed in class was a print ad for some old skateboard wheels. So it was like,
nice.
I don't even remember which brand it was, but it was like, I'd have to dig it and see if I can find it. But it was really
we should find it. I'll put it in.
It was literally just photographing somebody's skating around Savannah and then writing a really bad headline at the time that I thought was probably the coolest thing in the world, and photoshopping the wheels on it, and trying to make any of the styles you'd see in Thrasher as a print ad, just kind of like leaning into that stuff. So I think that was probably my first. I mean, you definitely had a lot of like illustration and like art classes and stuff you had to go through and do a lot of that. But I think one of my first graphic design things was a print ad.
That's awesome.
Which makes a lot of sense.
I didn't know you went to, it's SCAD, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. MDS went there too. Matt Smith, the designer, you know him? Yeah. Awesome. Brilliant UI designer, like really good product thinker and content creator. What was it like being on campus there? Like, what was the kind of vibe like going to, I never went to that world, the art school or design school. So what was it like going there?
Super inspiring. I kind of grew up not being a great kid in school, like B, C student. My parents would always push me to be, to do better, but it just, for whatever reason, never clicked unless I was really interested in it. Art class, photography, that stuff I would do great in. If I wasn't interested in it, it just didn't stick, So
it's the creative ADD thing.
Yeah, right. So I ended up putting together, I was in 8th grade, and I did this drawing in my 8th grade art class that was submitted and put into a high school art gallery exhibit that SCAD was sponsoring. And so in 8th grade is when I kind of found out, I was like, oh, wait, there's a school that I could go to that would allow me to follow, like art as a career, and kind of always had that in the back of my head, continued like drawing and working on things and put together a portfolio. Did a brief stint at community college in Jacksonville, which is where I'm from. Shout out to Duval.
Nice.
But that's my hometown. Did a stint there with some art classes, and then transferred up to SCAD like a year later after doing a year and a half of junior college. Transferred up, started in the summer, and then from there it was like straight A's. My parents were like a little nervous, but I remember kind of doing a tour of the school, and the like counselor that we were talking to was like, look, we learned that a lot of art kids thrive when they get up here because everything is hands-on and they're learning that way. And it kind of clicked because once I was up there, it was like all A's, Dean's List, just
awesome.
Enjoying being around other creative people. And it's kind of funny, because you're in high school, you may be one of the most talented artists in that high school. I think we had 500 kids that like graduated my graduation year. So it was like, so a bunch of kids there, but you'd have a couple of us that were like, pretty talented. And then you surround yourself with all these other kids that are just as talented as you are. It really pushes you to try to be better. And,
right. Did you experience any kind of imposter syndrome going from like the kid that could draw naturally to get into an art school where you're like, oh shit, like
yeah, of course. I mean,
another level.
Who doesn't? We still deal with imposter syndrome, right? Like it's something I don't think you ever get rid of. But yeah, like you get in your life drawing class and you're like, oh shit, I could do this. And then you look over and you glance at the dude next to you who's like crushing it. And you're like, damn, how did he get that depth and the shadowing and the perspective? Right? It's just stuff like that. And you just are like, all right, well, now I got to push myself to be, be as good as him, or I'm going to sit next to him in class and just see what he does. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's definitely times where I'd be like, maybe I'm not good enough to do this, but it all tends to work itself out.
Yeah. So What happened after school? Like, what was your first gig?
Yes. So I came back to Jacksonville, and back in the old school days, you had a physical portfolio, and people might not know what a yellow pages is, but I literally opened up the yellow pages to advertising and just went down to every agency that was in the Jacksonville phone book and just called and found out who their creative director or head of design was, head of the creative department, and just started like sending out letters. I had designed my little resume, my little, cover letter,
Nice.
envelope, everything. Cause that was it's like a final project in school was to create your portfolio and then all of your, business cards and everything. So I did that and mailed it out to a bunch of places. And there was an agency there called the Robin Shepherd Group that at the time he's since retired, and he does amazing wildlife photography, but his name's Tom Schiffinella. Shiffy is what we called him. He called me up and was like, "Hey, let me see your book." And I came in and had an internship. He offered me an internship, and I worked there for about a year and a half at Robin Shepherd Group, working on more or less like a junior designer, taking what the other art directors and designers were creating and developing print ads and stuff like that off of their look and feel and like whatever the brand had created, and then stayed there until I got opportunity to move up to North Carolina, where I ended up being at Ogilvy for a while.
Oh, nice. The famous David Ogilvy. I think I have his book.
Yeah. Famous David Ogilvy.
Yeah.
And then moved from there to Orlando and worked for Push, which Push agency, great branding design agency out of Orlando. Got to learn with Mark Unger, Forrest Young, and one of my favorites, Ron Boucher. All great mentors. Got to learn that's kind of where my craft and my love of making sure everything was beautiful kind of came together. And then did that for, I think it was like 7 years there, and met my wife there. And then
Nice.
at the time she wasn't my wife, but we've been dating, and she got an opportunity to move to Austin. So took a jump over to Austin for almost 4 years, and I worked for GSC working on Southwest. Got to help out on Radio Shack Super Bowl campaign. That was huge, helpful thing for me. I'll always be grateful for that. And then Avoid Humans was a little fun project we worked on. It was for South by Southwest. It was stumbled across some tech that would reverse check-ins for Facebook and at the time Foursquare, so we could tell where people weren't.
Okay.
And when South by Southwest comes in, like all the places you love to go to as an Austinite, you can't get in because it's so packed. And brands are taking over.
So the locals want to avoid.
Yes, exactly. So, Spotify's coming in and taking over your local coffee shop and painting it green. It's just all the things. So we put together this little app. It was a little web app that by the end of the first day was trending on Twitter, and
wow.
got a bunch of reco. But it was a fun little thing of just giving the locals an opportunity to see where people weren't, so they could decide where they wanted to go that day and not be surrounded by the craziness of South by.
That's awesome. How did was that just a side project that you were working on?
Yeah. A lot of agencies want to do little things like that to when especially in Austin, like there's a ton of stuff coming in. So it's like, how can GSD&M get some publicity, free PR, some news?
Right.
So they'd assign ideas to teams, like, hey, let's come up with something cool we could do in Austin for South by. We'd,
spin it up. Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to get more into your work in a little bit, for sure.
Yeah.
I got a lot of questions around that.
Sorry. Me, I can ramble, dude. We could talk.
Yeah, no worries. I love it. Yeah, so that's awesome. So you kind of made this pivot into the agency world, working on top brands of these companies. How did you transition into thinking in terms of creative direction for projects like a Southwest Airlines?
Yeah.
So I remember the old ugly ass planes before the rebrand, the blue.
Yeah.
So I would love to kind of dive into that, but like just on kind of the higher level, like how do you think about going into these projects with these brands? What does that process look like?
Yeah. Most agencies have a creative process that they've got in place, and it usually involves starting up with strategy, which, we've had this conversation. Strategy is huge. If you can't do anything without knowing like what the problem is, how you're going to solve it, what's the human qualities of it, so it usually starts with strategy. At the time when I was at GSC&M, I was like a senior art director and then an associate creative director. So my bosses above me, the creative directors, that are the ones that would like work with the strategists, and then we get kicked off on a brief, which I think you're accustomed to the creative brief. That outlines the problem, what we're trying to solve, the deliverables, any information you need for the project. All of that's delivered in the creative brief, and then we're given a deadline. Everything has a deadline. We've got check-ins with the creative teams and seeing where the teams below me, like what ideas they've got, and helping them refine those, polish them, get them ready for presentation. And that could be multiple check-ins internally with the creative teams, and then presenting it to the account team, who, I gotta say this because my wife's an account director, but they're the internal voice of the client. They want to make sure that everything we're doing is answering the brief. We're not like straying from the brief and doing anything crazy. And then,
are there times that you do stray from it and try to?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean,
you have to. I mean, creativity needs to go outside of the box sometimes.
Exactly. And you might find some little nuggets here and there that like guide you down another way. And it's not that it's outside of the brief. It's just, how can we pull it back in, this really interesting thing, this human quality or human insight that you found, like how can you pull that back in to align with the brief? And you go through rounds of that, and there's, I think I've talked to you about it, like creativity tends to come whenever you're not thinking a lot. For me, it's like in the middle of the night. You're gonna definitely go for your inspiration, and you're gonna look through tons of stuff that isn't even what I personally think is like not branding or not advertising inspiration. It might be somewhere else, and you'll get those ideas, get them ready, whether it's TV spots or print ads, or an entire campaign that's like digital, social, print, out-of-home billboards, and television. Like, how does that thread of an idea tie to all of those? And then you'll present them to the client, and hopefully they like the ones you like, and they don't try to water it down too much. And if you can get it through and get it made, then that's a win for you, and if you can try to get a bit of what you believe in into those spots, I think it's a win. Or into those campaigns, if you can say something that you truly believe in through the brand, I think it's a win.
Yeah, that's awesome. On the definition of the creative director, you mentioned a lot of different disciplines, like TV versus print versus digital. It's multifaceted project most of the time for these campaigns. Yeah. As a creative director, how would you define that role, and what makes a successful one versus a not successful one?
I think that the hardest part about being a creative director is like leading a team, and getting the team on the same page and understanding like what our end goal is. That's like one element, and definitely inspiring your team to do great work. You got to give them the tools and the ability to go off and shine and come back to you with great work. Then the other part really is narrowing down what the good ideas are. Are they on brief? Are they answering the business problem? Because, as a creative director, you're straddling like creativity, but also like the client's business problems. Are you selling, widgets quickly enough? Like how do you do that? And really just straddling that and making sure you're creating great work that's innovative and isn't tiresome or boring, both visually but also storytelling, and also using innovation, learning what's new. And I know you want to talk about AI eventually, but like starting to learn innovation. AR has been a thing, virtual reality, all of that stuff. When it comes out, you as a creative is like, okay, well, how can I understand that, and can I use it for my clients to create interesting, great work? Because at the end of the day, your portfolio is kind of based on the work you're making, and is it current, and is it creative, and is it solving problems?
Right. Yeah, I guess it depends on each project, right? Like, but what's your framework for defining what great work is versus what's not? Like when somebody on your team produces something
Yeah.
like where the quality isn't quite there, how do you measure that? Because it
Yeah.
could be a subjective thing depending on who the
Totally.
client is,
Right. Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it used to be, is it like visually stunning work? Like, God, that typeface you picked is amazing. And, oh, the photography is, and that's my visual side coming through with my background being in design and art direction. And then like working with the latest photographer, latest director, editor, all that stuff. But as you start to evolve, you're working with partners, writers, so you start to learn like tone of voice and what a successful script is written versus a non-successful script, and how you kind of navigate the writing aspect of it. And then you'll get around technologists. Different agencies have different people and they call them different things, but like any of the digital technology guys that are building really cool sites or apps or voice stuff, like whatever, the
Yeah.
technology guys, you'll meet one of those guys that inspires you. He's like, oh my God, he thinks completely different,
Yeah, for
or comes
sure.
at it from a different way. And then
Yeah.
you're just, as a creative director, you're learning all of those things and then trying to put it back on the teams to be like, that script's a little too wordy. I think you're getting a little too bogged down in this direction. Can you try it a little bit lighter? Can you cut it down and make it shorter? Let things breathe. When you're reading, you're reading it so fast, you're having to catch air. So like, let's spread it out. Also, like understanding taglines and what is good, what has been done before. There's just so much that you learn over your career that you just try to have little nuggets of like things you can store in the back of your head to then put on as a filter when you're reviewing work.
Yeah, for sure. It makes total sense. I think it's hard to kind of pinpoint that sometimes too. Like to be able to put it
Absolutely.
into words, like what is good or what isn't good,
Right. Yeah. There's
Speaking
also
of,
there's also the like make it go viral type of thing that clients love to say. And it's like,
I can't control that outcome.
I can't, they want everything to be measured in like data points and statistics and numbers and things like that. And at the end of the day, as a creative, yeah, you can kind of do some of that and you can kind of figure it out, especially the more experienced you are. But ultimately it comes down, it's not a science. It comes down to like a gut feeling of like, oh, I think it's going to work. I hope it works, and you just hope it does. And then you want to find the clients that are willing to let you try stuff.
Yeah.
Because if they're willing to try it and to take a risk, that means they've got your back on it, whether it's successful or not.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Look at I'm going to use an analogy, but like baseball hitters, like if you're hitting 500, that's considered amazing.
No one's ever done that
right
over a season.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm hitting 325, I'd be happy with the amount of creative.
You're in the Hall of Fame. If you get like 33% success
rate. I know I interrupted you. But,
no, that was awesome. I think one of the things that kind of sparked thought was around like balancing the client's expectations versus kind of your expertise and knowing what is good or what isn't good. Right. Maybe give me an example of like a time when there was maybe a difference there, an opinion, and where as a creative director, you kind of have to like lean into that and that assertiveness and say like, we believe that this is the right kind of story to tell for this versus that, like are there cases where you have to kind of balance that? I mean, like what is that a struggle ever?
It's always a struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking me for a scenario and I could
you
go
don't have to be specific in examples there.
It happens a lot. And I would say the further away somebody is from like the creative brief and the initial like briefing of the project, those opinions get a little crazier, a little wilder. We've had this conversation about doing sprints. It's like you want to get everybody that's making decisions in the room to make the decisions. And so there's plenty of times working on projects where you're like, yes, this is great. The internal team's bought off it. The client, our client team is bought off on it. And then they just go show it to the CMO or the, CEO or something like that. And they're like, no, I don't get that, and then you get this feedback that comes back that they're like, either start over or they start like trying to adjust things. And then that's when you kind of have to have a call and be like, can we get those guys in the room and like represent or like, it's almost like a game of telephone, how you start a thing and by the time it gets to somebody else, it's completely changed.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens in the agency world too, like, or in the branding world, is like, you have this great presentation, you got the client nodding, they're like saying, yes, this is great. And then by the time it gets to the upper level guys who may not be aware of the campaign or may not be aware of what's happening, or it gets to them and it's not presented in the same energy, or that they don't hit that it can fall flat. So, one of the things I always want to try to do is like, can I be and with the bigger CEOs and the C-suite people to present to as well, so that they can see the energy and the passion we have about the idea, and then talk about why it's working. Because a lot of times, you as a creative you rely on so much stuff. There's a great quote, you mentioned David Ogilvy earlier. There's a great quote about being, a creative, a client is like an inch wide and a mile deep. Really. And it kind of means like, they know a lot about their category. They know a lot about a specific thing. And as a creative, you kind of have to be an inch deep and a mile wide. And I've always loved that quote of like, you need to know really a little about a lot of stuff, so that you can talk about it. And I think a lot of times creatively, like, we'll pull from stuff that's outside of what their purview is and bring it in. And then it's kind of like up to us to sell it through and present it so they understand, like, no, yeah, like, I know you don't say words like cap, or skibby riz or whatever, but like, that's what your target audience is saying. And that's kind of
clocking for you.
Yeah. Like, we have to rely on who our target audience is right now. So come on, let's lean into some of these words and this vocabulary they're using. You might not be using it at 55 years old, but
right. Yeah, that we experience that in the product design world as well. User experience and trying to understand that we are not the user. Like, exactly. Me as a designer, I'm designing something for someone else, and even though I may use the product, but I am not the user. So like putting ourselves from like a third person perspective, a lot of times, like the people who maybe decision makers or hold some power at the top can derail it if they're not connected to the actual problem that the team is trying to solve,
Exactly. It's something you always have to have in the back of your mind.
That's
when
awesome.
You're reviewing work and stuff.
You mentioned the quote around an inch deep and a mile wide, going through the lens of personal skill develop. And, I think the jack of all trades, like knowing a little about a lot of things is coming more in handy now, I think, than,
for sure.
Than those specialty avenues that were taught in the past, that you have to specialize in this one particular thing. How do you think about that? Is like a creative agency organization, like, how is specialization versus knowing like a broad range of disciplines help?
I think it's different for different people. We're talking about my background, so I'll be honest. I always equate my career to Mikey Likes It of Life Cereal. Do you remember that? You remember that TV spot, like back in the 80s? And I think they tried to redo it. So Life Cereal is a cereal and it's like super healthy. And there's a line of kids sitting at the table, and the first kid doesn't want to try it because it says it's healthy. And he's like, do you try it? And he's like, I don't want it. And they're like all discussing the three older kids. And they're like, give it to Mikey. Mikey will eat it. And so they pass it down to like their youngest brother, who's like super little and cute. And he just looks at it and starts eating it. And the spot's like, even Mikey likes it or something like that. So I've always equated my career as being like Mikey. It's always this like, I'm a jack of all trades type of guy, because it was like coming out of school, I was thirsty to like do a lot of work and design a lot of stuff. So I would take on these projects, and then it ended up being kind of like, as I went on my career, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. Give it to KT, like, I know he can handle it and he'll be really great at it. I don't have the time on my plate. And I think that like allowed me to become quicker at projects, because I started understanding things and I can get to the solution quicker. But I think it also allowed me to learn a bunch of different stuff. Creative directors going on maternity leave. Oh, give it to Kevin. I know he can go and step in on a photo shoot and handle the photo shoot, and he's going to be great at it because he's done it before. We need some billboards done, for this billboard campaign. give it to Kevin. He'll knock it out. I know he can handle it. I think that's just kind of like been my career. But what's great about it on this back end is that then the relationships I've built through my career is now paying off. We haven't talked about where I'm at now, but like, I've built all these relationships where people know, like, if I go to Kevin, he's going to get it done. He can handle it.
I see that as a billboard. KT gets it done.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I've always just tried to deliver and create great work, and know that when people come to me, I can, rest assured they're going to get solid creative from me, and hopefully other people say the same thing about me if you ask them. But I always tried to be there for my creative directors and my CEOs in the past, and make work as good as possible, and no matter what it was. Billboards, banner ads, social media, I mean,
it's all important.
It's all important.
The work in front of you today is,
right.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer. Yeah, the benchmark I think is getting higher too, for delivering good work, and it's getting quicker in a lot of ways. Like the tools that we're using now. How have you kind of stayed on top of like the most recent trends working on these projects? And the tools are constantly changing. We'll get to AI a little later. Or now, however you want to talk about it. But like,
I mean, wherever this goes, I'm good with it. It's kind of like always being curious, always knowing that like I've been through changes in this field, like started with computers, and then it was like photography being online and buying, not paying for photo shoots, but being able to buy stock photography. And then you had your Fiverr and all those undercutting platforms coming out. There's like a lot of adjustments. Then
Canva, do it yourself.
coming out, do it yourself, Squarespace, like all those like DIY type of things as well that have come out. You got to be curious and know what those things have, so their limitations, so that when you're talking to a client, you could be like, yeah, you can do Canva or you can do AI, but here's the problems with you're going to run across with AI. It's going to give you a rastered image. It's not going to give you a vectored image right now, and I'm sure that's changing as we speak. But like, you can't take a rastered image from online and put it on a sign outside, like a 48-foot billboard, unless it's a digital. But like, it's going to be pixelated and look like shit. You customer who's going to use AI doesn't understand that. I, with all my experience, does. So, you should trust me. I always use kind of an analogy, and this is like not to say that I'm a doctor or a dentist or have spent as much time studying as that, but I often use this analogy of like, would you go to a doctor and tell them how to perform surgery, or a dentist and tell them like which tooth to remove? No, it's because they have the experience and the schooling and they know what they're doing, right? But in our field, everybody thinks they're creative, everybody.
Yeah.
No matter if they went to school for it or not, or have trained on it, everybody thinks they're creative. So, a lot of times clients come to you with ideas they already have, and you have to navigate that. Like, yeah, you're coming to me and you tell me what you want me to do, but with my experience, why don't you just let me go through my process, my interview process, my, learning about your company, and where the pitfalls are, and then let me come back to you and show you like what you should be doing. A lot. It's that narrowness again too. Like, oh, I see company over here, company A over here is doing this, and they're in my same category or same industry. I'm just going to do what they are because they're successful. But it's like, no, you're just muddying the water, and you're not standing out from that person.
That's a really good point.
It's
brand, like designed by comparison or competition.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not like let's throw everything down on the table and see where your competitors line up. Like, where are they? Where's an empty space? Where's the quiet space that your company could stand in and say something different?
That's a really great point. What about your discovery process? What piece of the discovery process tries to get to that question? Like, how do you break that down? Or what's the kind of the first principle there of breaking down that story to find those little nuggets that that
Yeah.
could be unique to a specific brand or a company?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the project. If I've got a strategist involved, like a brand strategist, that's usually I go, let's start with you, let you do all your research and competitive analysis and seeing, just pulling work in from all the competitors. And seeing what they're all doing. What's their tone of voice? Are they all friendly? Are they all goofy? Are they all like, you know, know-it-alls? Like, are they all heroes that want to help you? Like, what are they saying? What's their tone of voice? What do they look like? We've talked with color theory,
Yeah.
blue's a color of trust and calmness. Are you looking at a banking category? Everybody's kind of pretty much blue, or a hue of blue in some way, or green is growth and prosperity. There's all this color theory behind those colors, so it's a matter of like looking at your competitors and going, okay, everybody's using black or green or whatever in this space, and it's probably because they're environmental friendly companies, so they're all using green. Of course, it makes sense, right? Is there something else we can use that stands out from the herd and is a little bit different? So you look at that from color theory. Typography is another example. What is everybody using? Are they using serif? Are they using sans serif? Like, can we do a custom typeface? Is there something we can use there as well?
What's your favorite typeface? Go to if you only had one choice.
Oh, geez. I mean, I'm definitely a sans serif guy.
Yeah.
And the basic sans right now I'm kind of loving. It's an Adobe typeface called Basic Sans.
Okay.
Super clean. It's got like a little bit of a mechanical feel to it, like it's humanist, like it's been made by a human and not a machine.
Nice.
Which is like, if you know anything about old school typography, and like it was used lead and everything like that, and it was chiseled and created that way. So like anywhere you can get that human quality into it, I think is nice. But yeah, it's a
sidetrack,
but it's super clean. Yeah, I mean, we could go on for that, but it's all those variables, all the parts of the process, like interviewing all the main people that are a part of that company, like interviewing them, understanding what their goals are. Sometimes they've got separate goals, and it's a matter of like getting them to align on like, this is what you guys want, this is the goals you want. Trying to get them to understand that they're just like in design, like our own personal feelings should not get involved, which sometimes is hard. I don't like the color yellow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, how
yellow,
do you? Yeah, I know. Like getting into those kind of debates.
Yeah, you just try to use logic with them. Like a lot of theory and a lot of like structure of why you're picking these. There was a presentation I went to years ago on managing mid-sized creative departments, and I remember this guy. I don't even remember his name, but he'd do this presentation when he was pitching with clients. And when he'd come into the room before they would come in, he would put up all these giant sticky notes on the walls. And he'd start on one side and he would take you through like the decision process of like, well, we had this idea, but it didn't work because of XYZ reasons. And then we had this idea and it didn't work because of XYZ reasons. And he noticed that everybody was nodding like, oh, following along, nodding yes, right? So that by the time he got to the end final idea and he showed it to him, he's like, it's a lot harder to move your head, like stop from doing this, to move your head to left and right.
That's awesome.
Than it is for moving it up and down, saying yes the whole time. I just realized like this is a podcast, so people probably couldn't see my head moving, but he was showing you the reasons why something didn't work, and the clients were nodding their heads up and down in agreement, like yes, and then showing the result at the end,
like I'm doing right now. It's like
you're doing right now.
I don't.
Yeah, it's harder to stop moving your head up and down to then moving it left to right to say no, and I always thought that was a really smart way of like presenting work. So sometimes I try to use that in presentations of like, well, I thought about this, but it ran into these problems, and I thought about this, and the reasons I don't like these colors are this reason, and the reasons why I like these colors are this, or the type. You can get logic behind a lot of that. I'd say you pretty much set yourself off to winning something good, or getting some good work done. Every once in a while you'll have issues. I had a client one time who was afraid of birds. And I was presenting a name that was a bird name. It was
Okay.
like, all right, killed that idea. Couldn't do nothing about that. I'm sorry. I wish I would have
We should have
asked if
asked that
you.
in the research questions. Are you afraid of anything?
Oh, it's a new question now. Are there anything that you are afraid of or
Yeah.
terrified? So I don't have spiders in your
That's
brand or
hilarious.
anything.
That's funny. Oh
But it's all
yeah, I had
learning.
a question around like that kind of sales, not sales, but like the way you present work and
Hmm.
going through those examples of what didn't work is very fascinating. Not only are you getting people to physically like agree with you along the way and then flipping that to
Right.
like, hey, here's the solution because we tried all these things. You're bringing them on a journey essentially
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
like showing how much thought you put into it beforehand. And
Right.
it's like chess. Like I can
Right.
move in this direction, but if I do that, then
Yeah.
that rook is going to come from this angle. Like
Yeah.
there's
Exactly. You kind of see all the traps ahead.
yeah.
Um,
That's a really cool
yeah.
way of presenting it.
And I think, we've talked about it as well before, but like storytelling's huge, like I'm not only in creating television spots that tell emotional connections and do great stories like that, but giving somebody a story, for their brand also can really help. I told you about my brother-in-law who's in Austin, amazing, super talented designer. He
Yeah.
has his
Shout
own
out to his name.
studio,
What's his name?
Jet Butler at Photo
Jetboil.
Studio. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, Amazing guy. And when I moved out there, he brought me in to help with some of his branding projects there. And we did a project for a chef named Steve McHugh, who's down in San Antonio, and his restaurant's called Cured. And this is another example. Like Jet and I drove down to San Antonio, spent the time with him and his wife. They fixed us lunch. We, chatted with them and talked, and then went over. It's in the Pearl Brewery district. So Pearl Brewery was an old brewery in Texas, and they've got this beautiful area that they've renovated. And like the main distillery brewery is now a hotel, and then there's admin building, and then there's a circular building. I forget, it's like a roundhouse or something. I forget the name of it, but it was used for storing horses and hooking the wagons up to take the beer out and stuff like that. And those three buildings still remain. And then they've built all of these community projects and restaurants and apartment complexes and condos like all around there. So they've done this beautiful job on renovating. And Steve was given the admin restaurant to turn into a restaurant, and he was displaced from the New Orleans Hurricane Katrina, moved to San Antonio, and then started living there, and then wanted to open his own restaurant. And he's from Wisconsin, and we're learning all this stuff while talking to him. And he's a big like snout to tell. Like he wants to use everything when he's cooking and making meals. And he's really big into curing and charcuterie, and any of the cured type of food is always on the menu or mixed in somehow. So, interviewing all of this, we're getting to know him really well, and we find out he's a cancer survivor as well. And so I'm kind of in the car ride back. Jet and I are talking, and Jet's like, we should name his restaurant Cured, because it's got this double meaning.
Wow.
This like of the fact that he's cured from cancer, but also like he cures charcuterie and pickled items, and like it just kind of like at that moment I was like, that's a great idea. So we got back jamming and created what I think is a really beautiful brand for his story. And so now, long story short, we were talking about stories. We've now given him a story for his brand that meant something. So
That's
anytime
amazing.
anytime I think you can do that, I think you've got some really good chances to make some creative branding and work in general. Whether it's advertising or brand work, brand design.
Dude, that's amazing. What an incredible story. Every time I talk to you, you tell me kind of another thing that you're working on. You mentioned the AdventHealth project and I think you did that project a few years ago, right? For the kid that ran the
Running
marathon.
mates.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that was
That was
another
incredible. The point around what I was trying to make is like getting to the root of the story, the emotional aspect. Like I think that I forget who said it, but there was this quote that humans will remember visuals like a picture. They'll remember a picture, but they'll remember the story with that picture
Yeah.
longer
Oh,
than they would
absolutely.
just the visual itself. It's the stories that we pass on through generations, and getting to the root of that emotion is at the heart of storytelling, in a lot of ways, which David Ogilvy talks about in his book. It's all about copywriting and getting to the root of that story.
Check out my brother-in-law's work too. He does some amazing work too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So around that theme, and that insight really came from the research phase, right? Like
Yep.
being able to talk to him and understand those stories. Like, does that typically happen natural in discussion a lot of times in the discovery for you? Like, how do you kind of get to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of training yourself a little bit. I wouldn't say I was necessarily that way when I was younger. Maybe it's just kind of like I've had my own story go on in life, and I've just kind of learned, and I've had great mentors and partners, throughout my career, that it's just kind of boiled up to the surface of like connection, storytelling. We love movies, like you're saying, pictures, everything. Pictures worth 1,000 words, right? Like you can tell these really emotional, great stories and make people feel something. And ultimately, like, we're human beings. We love emotion. We love empathy. We love to hear these stories, people persevering and, feel good stories. So like, if we can tell that and make somebody feel an emotion, that's a win in my book. So
Absolutely.
really like diving into the strategy and getting to know the brand and asking those questions, like it may not come to you right away. It may take a couple weeks, but I think once you start putting it all together, you're like, holy shit, this could be something special.
Yeah. So let's pivot to AI. You mentioned humans, and we're emotional creatures, and
Right.
thinking about how something makes us feel.
Mhm.
Machines don't have that ability. So,
Right.
and this kind of ramp up of the last 6 months have been crazy. Just trying to
Oh,
learn the most
it's
recent
nuts.
tools.
Yeah.
From Midjourney to ChatGPT to all the other AI products that are hitting the market. It's like so hard to stay on top of. But
Mhm.
where do you kind of see this influx of like, there's a bunch of shit now, right?
Right.
And it's
Totally.
harder to parse out what is good and what isn't good when,
Yeah.
the models are just creating new shit. Like, within 5 minutes, you got a new website or a
Yeah.
logo or
I
a
mean,
brand.
I'm seeing friends making, spec TV spots, and I'm like, shit, that
Yeah.
would have taken, 4 months, 3 to 4 months to make, and here you are crushing it in 2 days. I mean,
Right. Yeah. It's like
it's
there's an advantage to it, but there's also like, how do you see it overall? Like, how are you kind of
yeah. I
analyzing
mean,
it?
I'm using it a lot. Again, it's one of these things. It's a tool. People that there's the sky is falling folks who believe like it's gonna take over my career, and I do believe like, yeah, there's gonna be some adjustments. But again, like I said earlier, you have to adapt. If you're gonna continue to do this stuff, you gotta adapt, you gotta understand it so you know what the limitations are, so you can best inform your clients who don't know anything about it, who just come to me and like,
Absolutely.
hey, I want to do something in AI because it's cool. And I'm like, okay, well, do you know, like, you can't copyright that. You create a logo, you can't trademark that logo because of the fact that it's created by AI, because it's pulling things from the internet. And it's, like, you can't do that. It's hard. Same with imagery, like, yeah, you can use that imagery if you want. That's cool. But you got to be aware of what the copyright infringements are. And, right now, like Midjourney and some of the other ones, like they still own that work too, like they can use it however they want. So you have to think about like what's best for your brand. Like, do you want to create an image that, they could also use, or, that might run into some copyright infringement issues, like it's just, it's such the wild, wild west right now. That, it's murky, and you have to be willing, right? How you have to know your client. Is your client willing to gamble that? Or are they, a Fortune 500 company that like doesn't want anything to do with it because they know that like there's some things coming along? And then you got to think about the morality issue of it, with the people online that it's borrowing work from, like being able to take an illustrator style, load it up into Midjourney and be like, I want you to make me something that copies this style, is morally, as an art kid who went to art school and draws, like morally, that's just shitty.
Yeah.
And there's not a voice. Unfortunately, there's not really a voice for those guys because it's all the tech billionaires who are pushing all this stuff. And, they don't care about the starving artists, So there's a little bit of that. But my use of it really is starting, just wanting to understand what it can and can't do. Where are people starting to see it being used in ways that aren't infringing on people's copyright and, protecting artists, and then using it to create mood boards. And I think this is probably, I will say, this is the tool I use it for the most. Clients aren't visual people. They can't really see what an idea is. So, you put together mood boards, or you try to show them examples of stuff that's similar. Having AI be able to create something that is like 90% of the way there has helped in a lot of ways to sell ideas through, because you can show it and you can put together a mood board and you can show like how the shoot would possibly look or how this thing's going to look. And then we go make it. Then we go pay the photographer, or the videographer, the editor, director, whatever. Then we go and pay those guys to make this stuff.
That's a great way of using it, not as a final end product, because you get away from the copyright. You're not shipping anything from it, but more the conceptual storyboarding piece of that process to get something started way quicker. Because typically, like, how long would that take in the past to be able to put together mood boards? I mean, probably weeks, right? Like
a couple of weeks. Yeah. I mean, from like kickoff creative brief to check-ins to starting to put work into a presentation deck to show the client, and working with, yourself, designers or writers to write scripts, and art directors to pull styles and visuals,
So what's your go-to tool right now for that process?
So Midjourney definitely is my probably one I use the most. And then Runway has really been awesome. I'm starting to dabble with like creating video. Runway does a great job of starting with that. And then Google has their new videos, which I haven't dabbled with. But Midjourney and then ChatGPT just for typing in ideas and having the GPT kind of like come back with its thoughts on the idea and kind of helping craft, refine it. And then honestly, like I've gone and created GPTs for my own, my own little freelance company, and using like palette finders and strategy suggest, just when I don't have the money to hire a brand strategist, well, then I'll go to my little GPT that I created and kind of start from there as a scratch. Or if I need help with color palettes, going that route and being like, you can
do way more with less now. Yeah, that's an interesting outcome, I think, from this influx of AI tools at our disposal. Do you think, what's your kind of thought on the future of like these like larger agencies that are competing for work versus like what you're kind of doing now, your smaller independent path? Do you see more of that happening where smaller, sole creators can just basically build their own business with these suite of tools? Like how do you kind of see the larger agency world kind of going down into more fragmented individual solo creators?
It's a tough question. I still think agencies are going to be around. It's a big moving ship that's slow to move. And I think there's actually a lot of articles out where they're starting to try to figure out how they can embrace AI. And I'm sure they're going to start developing in-house their own like AI SEO and media buying and, like all the things they can figure out how to create their own internal technology for.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a couple in talking with friends who have like, they've developed their own internal imaging generator versions. It's like Midjourney, but basically in-house, creating it in-house so that they own the copywriting. It's not, like it gives them more ability. Cool. So like, I think the bigger shops are going to adapt and adjust and bring them in, and it's probably going to lower the workforce in some ways because they're not going to need as many, media buyers and creative
specialty
skills, right? So like there'll be those adjustments. There's already mergers happening here and there. And then I think for the small guys like me, I'm going to use it to the best of my ability and try to offer things that I can to clients if they need it,
Nice.
I'm not
What's your
planning
kind
it.
of
I'm not,
ideal client right now? Like, so you left the agency world and
yeah.
maybe talk about that.
Yeah. See, 2021, I left the agency world to go in-house at a startup company that's been around, Circle. And I was there for a couple of years trying to build their in-house team, and then got let go of that and decided I was just going to start my own design firm. So that was going on 2 years ago. And so since then, I've just been running design, either from like being brought into agency life and being brought back into agencies. Like I said before, like my connections with creative project managers and stuff like that, like going back into agencies and helping out, working on ideas there, or finding my own clients through referrals, or SEO, search engine, hey, I found your site. We're looking to do a rebrand. You have really great work. It's kind of all
That's
kinds
awesome.
of networking, friends telling friends, you name it, man. We talked to, I think the other day, I have networking not only like in your own creative fields, going to your advertising or design meetup happy hours, but also business alliances. I've joined a business alliance, which has given me opportunity to meet a bunch of potential clients, and kind of helping them out. I'm on their public arts council, and
Nice.
it's definitely given me an opportunity to meet other people I normally wouldn't have, and it kind of gets me out from behind the computer for a little while.
Yeah, that's
So
always good. You
I think
can't
it's
stare
just
at
like
it.
casting that big net and seeing what comes in. You and I are going to hopefully work on some stuff
Yeah, let's
soon.
do
So
it, man. Yeah, I think,
um,
like I'm excited for the future. I know a lot of people are like kind of doom and gloom, coming from the corporate world. There's a lot of layoffs in the tech world right now, like a
yeah,
lot of designers have been let go. When I was working at Prize Picks, we posted a job application
right,
and there was like over 2,000 applicants for a single
yeah,
job posting, so it's very hard to compete now, I think
yeah.
in that world, especially for like junior people that are trying to get into the industry, maybe just left school. What would you
Mhm.
say to those people, that are like wanting to, be a designer or a creative? Like what would you, offer for advice for those people that are kind of seeking to get into what you do?
Yeah, I mean, learn everything you can. First of all, learn what good design is. What
Taste.
what
Yeah.
what good what your taste, your voice. Other people call it your voice. Some people call it your taste. Like what your aesthetic is. Learn what that is, because I I think we've had this conversation, but it's like the introduction of like Canvas in the world, and people thinking they can do art, like a designer's job. It goes back to the tooth pulling analogy I was using. Like, yeah, there are people who can go out and learn how to use Canva, but if you don't understand the principles of design and how important those are, because ultimately, like, we're delivering a communication, we're delivering a message. Like, if you can't, you don't know what those principles are, and you don't know what your aesthetic is and how you're going to handle things, it's going to hurt you in the long run. So like, really, like, learn about craft, because now with everything being so quick and so fast, and reiterating, like, on things, and like, it doesn't matter about how beautiful it looks, it matter about getting it out into the public. I personally think that is a bad philosophy, because I feel like you crash and burn that way. Like, if you put something out that's not finished or not baked, it's like a cake. It's just gonna foam. It's gonna decompress or fall down. So like,
Yeah.
my thought is like, spend the time crafting it, making sure it's right, and you'll get quicker at that. So something that took you, you know 4 months to do might take you 2 months to do, and then it might take you a month to do, because you're learning your process. You're learning how to get to the results and the solutions quicker.
That's
So
a really good point. One question I had for you on that topic is like, when is it good enough? Because me personally, like I've been in many cases where like I sat on this domain name for 10 years. People who design literally 10 years, and I've been wanting to do this podcast, but I never felt like it was maybe the right
yeah,
timing, or I didn't think it
right.
was perfect enough. There's been so many cases where I've designed something and I'm like, man, this is just not right yet. And that perfectionism can hold you back in a lot of
Oh,
ways too.
absolutely.
So how do you kind of think about that and approach that in your own, what is
I
good
mean,
enough to ship? It's
right.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ultimately, I'm under deadlines and timelines. So it's like, I have 2 hours to do this, then it's going to be as best as I can do it in 2 hours. or I got 2 weeks, or I've got a month, or, like,
Time constraints are
time
killer, man.
constraints,
Yeah.
constraints are the things that I think are what basically makes me say something is done. Because if not,
Yeah.
you're right. You'll noodle on something
Forever.
forever. And it's like, no, like you have to get it done. You'll put it out there and you'll be like, oh, I wish I could have done this differently. Yeah. I mean, everybody has a little bit of that, like, hindsight's 2020 type of mentality. So being able to look at something and be like, next time I'm going to do this, and it'll make it, like, you just learn from what you're putting out there. But definitely timelines are I think, what tells me something's done.
Yeah. That's why I love design sprints so much, just because it's
Yeah.
like we have 2 days to do something with this, and we're going to ship
Right.
it in 2 days no matter what. And
Yeah.
yeah, like I think that's easier in the digital space,
Mhm.
because it's like, for me, I never came from a print background. I don't even know,
Right.
like, the proper typesetting on any kind of like print materials at all. I never really learned that. I just got
Right.
into the digital space, and a lot of times you can get sloppy with that, and you're like, oh, I could just like make an update on that. But with print, once it goes out, we've talked about that in the past. It's like, once it goes out, it's like printed. It's like,
Yeah.
there's no going
Yeah. I
back
mean,
on
there's
that.
mistakes happen.
Yeah.
Mistakes happen. You just have to own it at that point. I would say another thing, and this is my old crotchety old man coming through, but like, I don't think designers these days spend enough time learning about color and prints and how print works,
Yeah.
and I've had to educate a lot of young designers on my team that are like, but I picked a hex code. And I'm like, yeah, but this is a 2-color job, not a 4-color job. And that hex code is going to be, you convert it to CMYK, is going to be a 4-color job. It's not a Pantone. So
Yeah.
now you got to take that hex code and hope you can find a match in the Pantone world, because
I've
it's
learned
going
that
to
the
be,
hard way too.
to where I came from opposite, like it was all print. So learning print first and then digital. But I do see a lot of people work backwards from like picking hex colors, which what looks good on screen. And, they may not realize that, yeah, it's going to be brighter on screen than it's going to look when it comes off of a
Totally. Like
4-color print
even in like
press.
designing something in Figma, I'm like, shit, I don't even have an Adobe subscription anymore. I can't even open Adobe right now. So like, I'm going to convert this PDF to CMYK just as like,
right. Yeah. And, I mean, there's definitely that part that I think is missing these days that would be good for, I think, younger generation to
that's
at
good
least
advice.
understand it.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Awesome, man. Yeah, this has been great. I love the conversation with you and just diving into this. I think we could probably go all day.
yeah.
Yeah.
We need more beers.
Maybe we'll do part 2, and we'll do a deep dive into a case study or something. I would love to maybe expand this. Like one of the ideas for this podcast is just to kind of go in to people's story, but then maybe do something more hands-on later on. Like we can dive into some details, some work details, if you're up for it one day.
For sure. Yeah, man. I'd love to do that. Love to help out however I can.
Awesome.
You know me, I don't really ever say no.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, man.
Except to my kids.
Yeah, you get good at saying no as a parent.
Yeah, right.
Well, cool, man. Yeah, any parting words? Where can people find you?
Yeah.
I'll drop all the links that we talked about. Your portfolio link and so forth. But anywhere else people could check you out?
I mean, I'm on the gram, I'm on LinkedIn, but all that stuff's on my site. So just drop Kevin Taylor.design on there. But just, if I was just gonna say, like, take everything in that you can as an artist. We're so we're so immersed with creative everywhere. Like television commercials, websites, social media, like it's everywhere. So just take it all in, find your voice, know what you like and what you don't like, and I think that'll help you in the long run.
That's awesome, man. That's great advice. Yeah, I would add one more thing to that, is like writing, from your own brain. That's another skill I think, it is overlooked a lot of times. Even that ChatGPT can probably write way better than I can, formally, right? Like but the core of an idea still stems from what's in your head and how you organize your own thinking around that. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've told you that I have a book next to my bed because sometimes I wake up with ideas at like 3 a.m. and I'm like,
write it down.
Crap, I'm not going back to bed. So I got to start working on this.
Yeah, that seems to be more rampant as we get older. I'm like waking up in the middle of the night now, and it's like, oh shit, man.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Thank you so much, KT. I
Of course,
appreciate
man.
it, man. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thank you. All right.
Bye.
See you, buddy.
Bye.